is a game I played just today, Sunday actually, Palm Sunday, and it's against a chess player from Iran. He's rated in the 900s. I think he was 950. He's now down to 926. You can see up on the top of the board there, top of the very top, that it says Iran, and he's 926. He moved down to 926. I moved up to 1026. Okay, he started off with a standard move, which is the king pawn. King pawn moves 2 steps to whatever you call that, e4. I counter with the standard move, which is a king. He brings his queen out really quick. That's pretty strange, but I know what he's after. He's trying to get my pawn in the middle, so I bring my knight out to protect the pawn. He brings out a knight, just as I'm not sure. I bring out my knight to threaten his queen and chase his queen away. So his queen moves back up a bit, and then I move my bishop out because I want to try to attack over there on his king side. He brings his bishop out to also attack on my king side, attack that pawn right in front of the king there. And so what I do is I castle really quickly because that's a good protection. Then the rook protects the pawn. And so now he brings a knight out. He's trying to develop his pieces a little bit. And so I decide I'm going to just bring a pawn up, protect my pawn, which is right in the middle, that pawn on the e5. He brings a pawn out way over on the left by the rook. I'm not sure why he did that, but he must have seen it in a book somewhere. Anyway, I threaten his bishop. Instead of removing his bishop, he brings it in closer. So I just go ahead and take his bishop, and we're going to swap bishops. He takes my bishop with his pawn, I took his bishop, and then now I move my knight over because I want to start attacking over that pawn for one thing. And I don't know why he moved his king over. There was no reason to move his king. He could have castled. He decided not to castle. He moved his king over to the middle, which is very strange. So I bring my queen out, getting ready to do an attack up the middle here, since his king is staying in the middle. He brings a pawn forward on the other side, threatens my knight. So I bring the pawn up and threaten his queen. He can take my knight, I'll take his queen if he wants. So he saves his queen by bringing it forward 1 space. And then I decide, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and take his pawn in the middle. That threatens his queen again. And then his knight takes my knight. I take his knight, which threatens his queen, and says, you got to get it out of there. I don't want your queen out here. So he moves it over 1 space. So now I start to figure, okay, how am I going to develop? I bring my knight down again back to where it was, and I threaten his queen. And now he pushes his queen way over to the side, which is where his queen stays. I bring that pawn forward to protect my center pawn because he's eyeing that one up. And now he's threatening my bishop. He's bringing a pawn forward. So I bring my bishop back 1 and save it. He brings a knight forward. I'm not sure what his plan is. He can't go anywhere with the knight. So I bring my pawn up a little bit and attack his pawn, which he just did. He brings his knight in like he wants to attack my knight or my bishop. I move my queen up. And I say, okay, if you want to attack my knight, I'm going to take you with my pawn, and then my queen is protecting. And if he wants to take my bishop, which he should have done, he didn't, I would have taken away the pawn. So instead he moves his bishop back, which is strange. So I bring my bishop up, aimed at his knight and his rook. So I pinned his knight to the rook. If he moves the knight, I'm going to take his rook. What does he do? He brings a bishop up to try to protect that pin right there. And so I bring up my other pawn on the right side, the queen side, and I bring it up to protect. And then he takes the pawn, I take it with my rook, which gets my rook out into the center space, exactly where I want it. It brings my rook out into action. He brings a rook over. I bring my rook over a little bit aimed at his knight, so we can swap knight, bishop, rook, whatever. I'm not sure what we're going to do there, but he brings a pawn up. Now I can bring the pawn. I could take his pawn, but instead I walk it forward because I want to get in and threaten his queen. So he doesn't take my pawn. Instead, he threatens my queen. So I move my queen back 1, and at this point it's looking pretty good for me because I'm ahead a little bit. No, actually we're even. We each have 2 pawns, a bishop and a knight. So he brings the pawn up. I take his pawn with my knight, and my knight is totally safe there. Nobody's threatening it at all. He brings the rook over to kind of pin my bishop with my queen. So I put him in check. I move over one, put him in check. Now he's got to do something. His king gets blocked in the way of my bishop. So now I can quickly bring my queen in, put him in check. There's no threat on my queen. His rooks are there. He moves his king back into the back file and the back rank and on the white space. So I bring my rook over to protect that bishop. And what does he do? He brings a rook over to threaten my queen. So I just slide over one, grab a pawn for free, threaten his bishop. He says, oh, you can't take my bishop, because he's got two rooks in the back rank there. So he moves his rook back. So now I move my my bishop back one, and my thinking is I want to get him back in check. Yeah, he threatens my queen again with his rook. So I bring my queen over, put him in check. The only thing he's got left now is to move his knight into place. He moves his knight, I take it, and that's the end of the game. It's about 32 moves, and I beat the guy. I'm surprised. He made a couple blunders, so did I. He made 3 blunders, I made 2. I made about 6 mistakes. He made 8. With the computer analyzes all this, and then I finally finished it off here in 32 moves, maybe about 45 minutes. You can see my time. Maybe you can't see my time, but I used up like almost 50 minutes of my 1 hour time. He was only at about 10 minutes of his time. So he wasn't taking long enough to think. I was taking a little longer to think about where I wanted to move. I just watched a great chess video, and Carol found, and it's a guy named Ben Hunt, and he's got great videos, British guy. And so I watched that, and he said, just stop and think before you move. Think of all the alternatives. Think of, okay, this is one good idea, but maybe there's 2 more good ideas, and then what? And so I was eating up a lot of time. I was worried that this game could go on and I'd lose by time. If you don't finish in 60 minutes on your time clock, you lose. But fortunately, I was able to move in on his king, and we still had a lot of pieces left. I had 2 rooks and a bishop and a knight. He had 2 rooks and a bishop. We both had queens and several pawns. So that's the latest game on chess.com, and I'm happy to win. I'm now at 1,026. This can't go on forever, obviously, so I'm going to keep going. I'm doing about 1 game. Well, this was a little more than a week, but I'd like to do about 1 a week, plus do some lessons, do some of the puzzles, and do some of the YouTube clips that Carol finds. She finds a lot of great stuff. And then hopefully I'll just keep moving up a little bit at a time. I'm sure I'll go down 1 step, up 2, down 1, up 2, and that's kind of the way it goes. So anyway, hope you had a good Sunday, and that's it for today.